Hi. I'm just going to answer your question for you. The project that I'm currently involved in, Safer Spaces for All, and I'm also doing some work with young Professor Washington Ochieng at Imperial College London. Uh, the question is, and this is the way I say it, we've got all this academic structure. We've got a cherry on the cake. We've got lots of policies, outcomes, as you discuss, but we forgot to bake the cake. We've stopped looking at the people that really matter, and that is the people on the ground. So when Ebru talks about equity, she's absolutely right. When Toby talks about the need for changing education and reaching further down, but we need to go a step further. The lowest common denominator are the people, the children in our schools. We can use STEM education to do that. I've actually costed this out completely, cost £1 billion a year that you could continue to do year on, year out. In fact, you don't even have to pay for it because you could raise that money through various social enterprises, music fest, that kind of stuff. It all works. But the bottom line is you've got to start teaching these kids right from the get-go. How can I save mummy if mummy falls over? How can I save my brother and sister, my family and friends? What do I do if the lights go off? Where are the candles? Where are all these things? David, it's really simple. Now, from there, what you've got is you've got a basic foundation, a mass. It needs structure further up. It needs help. It needs people like academics, etc., police to come in and help organize that. But I think you've said in some of the things that we've heard before that in a lot of cases, in these really awful, disastrous situations that have happened, invariably it is the communities, the family unit, the community that actually works to help itself until the authorities can gather, collect themselves and arrive with the necessary resources. But for now, it's got to be the kids. One final, just saying, one of the best things I saw was from our own Chris from the ISRM in Australia when she sent me a video, and there are kids learning after the Fukushima disaster and the flooding that occurred, how using VR headsets, how to behave in a flood. I thought that was great, and I thought it typifies, and the reasoning behind it, as you know, is that you teach the kids, and conversely, the parents help the kids, etc., with the homework, and then we learn from that. It goes up the chain.
Cheers,
Thank you,
cheers, Ian.
David.
Thanks. I think Fukushima is a great example. I know a lot about Fukushima because I wrote a report on it. As you know, I speak Japanese. I know Kiyoshi Kurokawa, who wrote the official report, that I actually was in Tokyo with him last year. Um, but the thing about Fukushima was, as the Kurokawa report made, and those who I'll send a link to people, but you should read the executive summary. He said very clearly this was not a natural disaster. This was a made in Japan disaster because, as Toby has said, we did not do the things we were supposed to do. There's supposed to be 5 levels of defense. We only had two because it cost $100 million for each of the other ones, and we thought, well, we'll take that hit. So you've got to get the stuff right first. You've got to get things right. Otherwise, it goes wrong, and going wrong has consequences. Andrew Blades, let's bring you in from Australia, and thanks for that, Ian, as always. Andrew.
Cheers, David. I'm not in a place where I can have my camera on, so I'll have to be cameraless tonight. Couple of things. I think the early on comment about who pays and who bears the impact and responsibility of various events. Like here in Australia, we used to have a whole heap of infrastructure that was government owned. Then we sold it to the private sector, and the private sector now runs it for profit. So the government now has multiple layers of legislation in place, being policed by public servants that often have no background at all in either critical infrastructure or the particular system, providing advice to critical service providers. And those private companies just love that legislation, because when something goes wrong, they say, well, we knew that wasn't our biggest risk, but you legislated that we had to focus on this. So we did. The result was resources weren't available for what's actually important. So the government's really good at bringing risk onto itself, because it seems to think that that approach will be really sound. I think the other thing, also off the back of that, was this idea of the all hazards approach. Most people are using a multi-hazard approach. I think the UN's identified there are 306 hazards. I'm yet to see an all hazards approach that has all 306. I think it's a nice use of phrase here in Victoria. It'd certainly be used to say, well, we look at 20 different hazards, but it's not recognising that all hazards is supposed to be risk agnostic, and we're supposed to be concentrating on the consequences and how do we manage those consequences. Next point is around, we've got great systems. Those systems are resilient for what they were designed for. Their environment has changed, and because their environment has changed, they're no longer fit for purpose. And any chance I get to get on that soapbox, I'll take it, David. I think many of the things that we talk about for resilience, the question is resilient to what? So I've looked at bridges that are flood resilient, but they will not be resilient to an attack by another country. If somebody bombs them, they're going to collapse. So we've got some serious questions about, when we talk about resilience, what do we want to be resilient for? So I think about my 16-year-old son, who is not allowed to carry a knife in Australia, but he is allowed to carry a chainsaw. He's allowed to go into a store and buy a chainsaw, and he and his mates have chainsaws. And when we have storms, they go out and they cut out those trees, and they're quite happy to go and help a neighbour with their chainsaw, any opportunity to whip it out and cut down some foliage for the neighbours. But it's quite amusing to see some of these young kids when they're driving along with mum and dad, and they pull over something. It's, all right, Dad, I got my chainsaw in the back car. We'll just cut that tree up in the storm, we'll be good to go. So we live in a rural setting, but it's very interesting to see how different people approach those types of things. It is also very amusing to see somebody in a three-piece suit get out of their Mercedes, put on their chainsaw chaps, and cut into a tree to get it off the road for other people. That's a sight to be seen, complete with helmet and everything that goes with it. Final 2 points. One is, we talk about community a lot. I often question the wisdom of talking about community. You look at a multi-storey building with 5,000 people in it. Is that really a community? The city of Melbourne itself has 75,000 people in it. Now, that's not big by London or many, but those 75,000 people, it's questionable how much they have in common and whether they see themselves as a community. I think the work of people like Robin Dunbar with Dunbar's number, saying that when we're starting to get up that 150, 160, outside of that, people really struggle to say, well, how do I maintain the required social connections to have that? So I think that the question is so frequently, what community? I'm in the community of universities that I have never attended because I've done it all online, yet I have close friends from those experiences who may live in Melbourne with me, but we've never actually been to the university that we attend. And I think this was one of the points that's brought up. How diverse and broad is that? My final point is organisational learning and learning lessons. So to the best of my knowledge, there are only 2 institutions in the world that run postgraduate or postgraduate courses in organisational learning. We talk a lot about learning. We don't have a pedagogy for organisational learning. It's akin to a child walking into their first year of primary school and being told, here's a maths book, that's what you need to know. Like, we've got to have a structured way of helping organisations learn. I was talking to one of my executives recently, and he said, in any given year, we have a minimum of 20 projects that we complete. They have between 20 and 30 recommendations for improvement next time. He said, you do the maths on that. He said, we as an executive don't have the opportunity to look at, here's 1,000 recommendations to improve the organisation. Somebody's got to help us work through that. And I think that's a challenge, and it's a challenge that even for organisations like NATO, who run a lessons learned course and a lessons learning process, the key question here is, how do we actually help organisations learn? We're very good at helping the individual learn, but we just haven't taken that next step to how do we help organisations learn, and who in the organisation should take responsibility for that.
Cheers, Andrew. As always, wide-ranging. If we don't use the word community, then what word do we use? I mean, because there has to be something. I mean, and as a concept, I think it's, again, I'll go back to the academic stuff. I'll go back to Ritzel and Weber's idea about wicked problems. It's not right or wrong. It's not good or bad. It's useful. And I think the community, the concept
I
of
actually
community is
think we need to recognise that in some cases, we're dealing with societies, which is much bigger, with a far larger degree of complexity, as opposed to just saying this community. In many cases, we're dealing with multiple different. We just don't have. It goes back to your early comments about we're trying to describe the internet while still using a standard typewriter.
great stuff. Thank you, Andrew. Good comeback. Of course, you're talking about loop learning. Anybody who's done their undergraduate degree knows Algorithm and CERN. Double loop learning. We do single loop learning. We're not good at systemic double loop learning. So many things to talk about. Toby, I want to come back to your point about was it terrorism at Heathrow was the first thought. And of course, from the operational perspective, it doesn't matter. In terms of the consequence management, there's basically only two risks. You talk about the risks of Heathrow. Fundamentally, there's only two risks at Heathrow. Only two. Either we can't access the facility, or we can access it and it doesn't work. I mean, that basically, and each time we see Heathrow have a problem because of snow or because the M4 goes down or because the IT, it's like, oh my God, this is unique. We've never seen it before. And the question is, are we ready?